So what have you been finding using sine, cosine, and tangent of the triangle? Like what piece of the triangle have you been finding? The sides. Have we solved for any of the angles? Okay. So if we are going to solve for an angle, we need the inverse trig function. Okay. So like if the tangent of x equals 5/4. Okay. Well, 5/4 is inside of our tangent function. I can't just like divide by tangent. That's not how it works because that's not multiplication. Okay. We're inside of the tangent. So in order to undo something, we need its inverse. So we have the inverse tangent function. So if we have something like this, then x is going to be the inverse tangent of the number. Okay. And what I want you to do, I want you to get your calculator. I want you to find the tangent button. Okay. Now, when you find the tangent button, do you see the tan -1 right above it? Okay, is that what we just wrote down on our paper? Okay, so what you're gonna do is you're gonna hit second tangent, and that tan -1 will come up, and then you can type in 5 divided by 4. $51.3.
Did I do something wrong?
Yeah, but where's your second one? You have to,
Okay, you need to make sure you gotta open a parentheses.
No.
So you need to do
Wait, then what's the
parentheses.
difference between parentheses and no parentheses?
It's taking the inverse tangent of 5 and then dividing it by 4.
Oh.
Okay, Harvey, did you hear that? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So the inverse sine. Okay, if the sine of y equals 3/7. Okay, notice how y is an angle. We're solving for an angle. We know the sine ratio of that angle is 3/7. Then what we can do is we can use the inverse sine of 3/7 in order to figure out what y is. Okay, so I want you to practice using your calculator. Mm-hmm. $25.4. Yes, so these are, since we're solving for an angle, we need to put the degree symbol on our answer, okay? So anytime you're using the inverse sine, inverse cosine, inverse trig, we are solving for an angle, okay? All right, so last one, if the cosine of z is 4/9, okay? Notice how z is an angle that we're missing, okay? Then we can take the inverse cosine of that ratio in order to find the missing angle. 63.6 is what Braden says. Okay, so really, what we talk about today isn't really that different than what we did Thursday, Friday. But now we have to solve for the angle, so we just have to remember when to use the normal buttons and when to use the inverse buttons. Okay, so I want you to come down here. You see where it says notes? Okay, we're gonna write in 3 examples. Okay, so here's example number 1. Okay, we're gonna have to draw 3 triangles in this little notes area. So here's triangle number 1 that we're gonna draw.
I was about to say you pretend to be.
We are going for the angle, right? Now, what sides do we have? Okay, we have opposite and we have hypotenuse. So what trig function would be of benefit? We know that the sine of angle X is opposite over hypotenuse, 3/5. Okay, now we need to understand that since we are missing the angle, in order to solve for our missing angle, we need to use the inverse sine button with our 3/5. What'd you say? Okay, and since we're solving for an angle, you need the degree symbol. Make sure you punch this into your calculator and make sure you also get 36.9. We could have maybe have 5 people making the same mistake. Is it likely? No. Is it possible? Yes. But more importantly, I want to make sure that you know how to use your calculator. Okay. All right. Okay, so here are examples 2 and 3. What I'd like you to do is draw them, and then you and your elbow partner work together on setting them up and solving them.
It is just like 31.0027. We put 31.06.
Anybody need an apple pie with ice cream bookmark?
Oh, it's not good.
It doesn't smell
It
like
doesn't smell
it. That's it.
Okay.
So, you should buy all this.
I should buy you what?
You should already get it. And so. It's good. Yeah. $100 worth of candy, 30 ounce sauce. 30 ounces of sauce is so much. That's too much.
That's like, I think my
That's
cup
too much.
is 32 ounces.
Yeah. That's too much. They just like drink it when it's done.
Oh, this is 30. This is 30 ounces.
How would maybe ranch? Yeah. Yes. They're gonna overflow. I can't. Yeah. Like,
Oh, yeah, I've seen
Harvey, what trig function do we need for example 2? For number 2? This one? You said tangent? Are we looking at the blue triangle? So this is adjacent and 7 is hypotenuse. Would you agree? Okay. So we have the cosine of x is 7/6. Nope. 6/7, right? Yes. Okay, so in your calculator, did you punch in the inverse cosine of 6/7? What'd you get, Alexa? 31, and then it was like 0.00 something, right? So if we're going to the nearest 10th, 31 degrees. Okay.
Oh wait, how do I keep doing this?
That is amazing. Don't lean back on your chair.
Like every chair.
Why is one saying that?
Nora, what trig function do we need for example 3? All right, so the tangent of x is 10/8. In your calculator to solve for x, we can put in the inverse tangent of 10/8. And Alex, what did you get for x? 51.3 is what Alex got. Does anybody disagree?
If it's 10/8, can we run it down to like 4? Yes.
I mean, technically, yes. Since we're putting it in our calculator, you wouldn't have to. Okay, but yeah, it would be the same as 5/4. Okay. Can we put our two on, please? Okay, I want you to go back up to the top of the page where it says solve a right triangle. If you are ever given the instructions of solve the right triangle, that means you need to find all the sides and all the angles. So if they give you 2 sides and 1 angle, you need to find the rest. Okay, so I'm gonna have you turn to the next page. Okay, so I could give you one of 2 things. I could give you 2 side lengths and you have to find everything else. Or I could give you an acute angle and a side length and you have to find everything else, okay? So we are going to look at one of each, okay? So first example, I'm gonna draw in pink a triangle that I want you to also draw. Keep in mind, we are going to do 2 examples, so don't get too excited with. Okay, in this pink triangle, we have angle A is 40 degrees. We have side AC is 20 feet. Without having to think too hard, what's something we can find? We can find B. What is angle B? And how'd you get that? Okay. So I think the quickest way, if it's a right triangle, we know the two acute angles have to add up to 90. Okay, 90 minus 40 is 50. Don't overthink it. Okay, so now we need to find our other two sides. We need to find this side, I'll call it X, and we need to find this side, we'll call it Y. Okay, so in order to find side X, how would you like to do that? Side X, this guy right here. Okay, I'm gonna choose 40. I think I'm gonna like that set up better. So we can say that the tangent of 40 degrees is X over 20. Do you agree? Okay, now notice how we have the angle, okay? So these are problems, or this is a type of problem from last week that you did this morning in your warm-up, okay? Think about how you need to type this in your calculator. X.
I mean, do you do
So 16.8, and since that side AC is labeled in feet, we also need to label this in feet. So at this point, we could do one of two things. We could use Pythagorean theorem, or we could use another trig ratio, okay? Okay, Nora's saying, I'd rather do trig, it's easier. Okay, Clark maybe wants to do Pythagorean theorem. Okay, either way, we should get the same answer. Okay, which is the beauty of it. Okay, but let's say we want to use cosine. We know that the cosine of 40 degrees is 20 over y. Do you agree? Okay, so think about how you would punch this into your calculator. Okay, you came back?
Yep.
Okay.
Could you do sign here? Like 50?
Yeah, you could do the same. What are you getting?
Bright yellow, like
26.1 feet. Okay. Now, one thing I will mention, notice how when we set up the cosine ratio, I use all given information. If I would have done the sine of 40, I would have had to use a rounded answer. Sometimes that's unavoidable, but when we have to use an answer that we rounded to find another answer that we round, we could have we could be off by like a decimal. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind when you're choosing what you're gonna use. Okay. All right. Yes. Oh, okay. I wasn't sure where you're getting at. Okay, let's talk about the second example. All right, here is our last example for the day. Write it down.
We use the inverse of tangent to get both.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So you're saying that we could say, okay, let's call this angle X and let's call this angle Y. How would we solve for angle X? What would we need to set up?
Negative tangent equals.
Okay, so the tangent of X equals 5 over 6. So in our calculators, we're typing in the inverse tangent of 5/6, right? Degrees. Now, we do not need to do more trig. We know that angle Y is going to be the complement of that.
Two.
So we know that in a right triangle, since this is 90 degrees, then these two have to add up to be 90, and we call those complements. Now. Okay, now I need to find the hypotenuse. We can use trig, or like Clark suggested, we also have the Pythagorean theorem. The Pythagorean theorem, we wouldn't have to use any of our rounded answers, so that's going to give us the most accurate. Okay. What is 25 plus 36? Square root of 61, which we can approximate. Okay, so your job for me is to finish the next two pages. So page 270 and 271. Those are your student journal extra practice problems. It's 1 through 11. That's what your homework is, and I'll let you get started.